my opinion, I feel that we are spun up to go to war and to not come home.
I think the only way you can pull the trigger is where that bullet's going to go, I hate. My name is Judd Everly, and I first went to Duquesne in March of 2013. I was reaching out through the VA helpline. I was in a time of crisis up in Greece City, where I'm from, and I was looking for sweat lodge. I was looking for a native, an indigenous way to help heal my wounds. And I am from that area, but I hadn't lived there for a long time and I hadn't practiced my heritage. So I didn't have any connections. And I reached out and I specifically asked, I said, how can I get into a sweat lodge? And within that same day, the Butler VA had Duquesne University calling me back. And when I went down to Duquesne, I was completely wide open. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I just wanted a sweat lodge. And so this woman who I had at least an hour or so on the phone of an interview, a couple different conversations, Denise McMorrow, Dr. McMorrow, she was who I saw down at Duquesne University, and it was extremely peaceful. I immediately trusted Denise from my heart. And it was, I joined the United States Air Force out of high school, 86 to 92. I was in Desert Shield and Storm in combat. Got out for 10 years when the Twin Towers dropped. I signed back up. I changed my career field to aeromedical evacuation. I was a flight medic. I am completely honored to be part of 3 different campaigns over 2 different eras to support our country and defend the United States of America. I will do it until I have no other breath in my lungs.
What we now have called post-traumatic stress disorder is our society's modern interpretation of a human universal. The psychological wounds of war have been named and ritually addressed in healing in all traditional warrior cultures around the world and through history. My favorite term actually comes from the American Civil War, where they would say that he suffers from a soldier's heart. There is a kind of popular fantasy that people are civilians and then they go through, join the military, and come out of the military and are simply civilians again. But for those who've been deployed, and particularly for those who've been deployed to a war zone, that description is a kind of self-deception that is not helpful, because people have been marked by war and they're changed. they're different, and to try to pretend that they're not different, even if they themselves try that, doesn't have a good outcome. I've spoke to a man who had been in Iraq for less than 2 weeks, and he was on a patrol, at least at an outpost, at a checkpoint, when a car came towards them at some speed and drove through the first checkpoint. It was clearly now racing at them, him and his buddies. And so they put some bullets into the car. One jammed, a heavy caliber bullet jammed the engine, and it froze and stopped. The car caught fire, the driver was killed. And then they ran forward, and they saw that the driver, in fact, had explosives on him, and he was a suicide bomber. But the evil in this was that he had kidnapped a young woman and her 2 small children and handcuffed them to the inside of the motor car, to the back seat. And there was no way they could get out, and they were now being consumed in flame. And these young soldiers were in the position of having to shoot them to put them out of their misery. That's evil. There are not 2 sides to that story. In 1945, Jung wrote, "The sight of evil kindles evil in the soul. Something of the abysmal darkness of the world has broken in on us."
In the city, with people, there's a game I have to play and act. There's no act out here. And my calmness comes back. Smiles get bigger. And even like right now, don't hear anything human. I think the problems that I have heard about soldiers, especially the combat soldiers coming back, I do think, and I can only speak for the Vietnam people, they were brought up, even though you might not go to church, but we're brought up in the "it's wrong to kill, thou shalt not kill." And then we're told to do just that, kill. And that's a lifelong, like, oh my God, everything I thought about morality or whatever is now changed. I am now killing people. I am trained now to kill. I would give talks to schools on Veterans Day and things like that. And I would always go up to the teacher, please do not have the kids, did you kill anyone? Well, I was telling the therapist that, and he goes, why'd you do that? He goes, you did. Say you did. And it hit me. Yeah. He goes, people sent you there too. I started telling it. People would ask me, hey, did you kill anyone? Yes, I did. And it's now something I don't hide. I'm not hiding anymore. It's part of me. Up in Khartoum, there was an American doctor, Patricia Smith. She had a whole hospital for mountain yards only. Again, mountain yards were picked on. If they would go to a Vietnamese hospital, they may as well die. So when I was in Campanari, I decided, see what I can do. I made a little hospital, 12 beds, for mountain yards only. You know, I think of all the terrible stuff. I built a hospital. And that, to me, is pretty awesome.
there's some rugs, white rugs, fluffy rugs in there that you can bring into the tent to lay down on if you want to go get some.
This is known as the Quanam incense, and when I was in Vietnam, we always would open up spaces with this or make offerings with this kind of incense. So there's a particular one from Vietnam, and we always have an odd number. In this case, I'm using 13 for the 13 mothers of the tent.
The Duquesne Military Services Clinic was really an initiative started by Dr. Brooke to try to serve the community in Pittsburgh of veterans and veterans' families as well. At the core, it was positioned as a kind of complementary service to what was already being offered in the community through the VA and veterans groups, but it had a more inclusive kind of criteria for people that could come. And it also, of course, provided a different perspective and a different paradigm from which to consider veterans' experiences than what would have been, otherwise offered in the community. And then alongside that, too, is a training opportunity for doctoral students like myself. What I've kind of come to over the years is that a lot of what happens in terms of process, in terms of healing, is actually carried by the imaginal. Like what we think of as more of like the psyche actually communicates in images. So the metaphors, the symbols, the imagery, the kind of aesthetics of your life are a really, really vivid description of your psychic life, usually. And very often talking about something, going into the cognitive place of we're just going to work in the mental body and discuss it or analyze it, doesn't often touch what perhaps the psyche might need, as far as it's a different language often. And so, there's a way in which the ritual work really explicitly taps into what I think is as naturally the psychic language of the soul. Many veterans really actually, if they've been doing a different kind of therapy for a long time, it's almost like a relief. It's almost like, oh, here's something that actually makes sense. There's a symbolic action that is able to address in real time something that is happening in the psychic reality. And it's different from, let me analyze it and try to talk myself in or out of something.
Yeah, you see.
Get that sun out your eyes. Oh.
My name is Sarah Skiba. I was in the Army from 2009 until 2015. Joining the military so young, you continue almost being coddled to an effect, but then upon getting out, you're thrown straight to the wolves. You're not given that transition period that most 18 to 22-year-olds get between going to college and going to the real world. There's no transition there. It's just, hey, you're done. Bye, good luck. When I started with military services at Duquesne, at that point in time, I was dealing with taking care of my daughter, attending school, trying to get good grades, trying to get adjusted to a very different life than I had previously, and do that all without having a mental breakdown. A service like Duquesne is helpful in providing that transition, providing that space to say, hey, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help with this. I need some sort of guidance, or I need someone to talk to. I'm stressed beyond relief, and now I've gone from doing PT every morning to take all of the responsibilities that I had never had previously.
Post-traumatic stress is an incomplete process. It's not a pathology. The plan for reintegration is now just starting to happen, and from groups like Duquesne University.
You know, the integration of something that might seem out of the box, you know, it's not for everybody, but I would say that in most cases that I've seen, it's been the crux of where something turns for somebody. It's the boat that carries the healing. It opens the door. And what happens after is you know, the journey for a person.
Now, my daughter, she went to these sessions. She asked a question. I hemmed, I hawed, and the therapist, what's the problem? She might get angry. She might not accept it. Then the therapist says, yeah. And then Jess chimed in, hey, Dad, I love you now. That's not going to change. So I started letting things out. And she still loves me.
What I'd like to say to the people at the Duquesne Military Services Clinic is thank you. I appreciate everything they did. I'm sad that it's gone because I tried to go back and it turns out that they were finished. But I appreciate everything that they did to help me and the services they offered and the services they've offered to so many of our students too. And I'm grateful. I'm very grateful.
Take homecoming as a task. It's not something that simply happens because you're here. Speak to your family. The impact of war will be communicated to your family and the next generation. You either communicate it by impact or you communicate it in some kind of story which honors the experience of those that you were with. Find some civilian that you can trust and start to speak to civilians. At some point, if you're ever going to come home, you're going to have to take that leap of faith. And I want to assure you that there are a lot of civilians out there who will welcome you lovingly home.